Welcome everybody to Community Alliance of Family Farmers and the Sonoma RCD's webinar. We're going to be exploring a tough conversation tonight, which is of course the drought. So if you're here looking for farming during drought, you're in the right place. Just wanted to give a quick overview. Community Alliance of Family Farmers is an organization that's been around for over 40 years, advocating for sustainable agriculture, family farms, and local food systems. Through on-the-ground programs and services like education and webinars like these, to political advocacy in Sacramento and DC, trying to give small farms a voice in our political process. So lots more to learn about there. Feel free to visit our website, CAFF.org. But tonight we're going to be joined by the Sonoma RCD Resource Conservation District, as well as a couple other speakers to talk about what's on the minds of most farmers and ranchers here in California, and as we see even beyond California. So just wanted to, before we dive in, want to let everybody know that there's going to be a follow-up on May 4th. UCA&R is going to be putting on another workshop following up on this all morning workshop. So I'll share that information at the end of the webinar and mail it out to folks who attend here tonight. But before we get any further, I'm curious to find out who's here in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and do a poll, and you'll see that pop up on your screen right now. We want to get an idea of who's here. Are we farmers? Are we ag service providers? And also where you're located, whether you're here in California, or I think we even have some folks from outside other parts of the country struggling with drought. So it looks like, okay. All over the place. Give you just one more second to fill out that poll. All right, so as you guys can see, most folks here are farmers and ranchers. We do have some ag service providers, a couple of gardeners and homesteaders. Of course, the drought affects all of us, no matter what scale we're growing on. A couple of folks from the media, just one student, a researcher, and then a couple of concerned citizens, which I think, given that this is our food system, I think everybody should be concerned at this point. Most folks here are from the North Bay, but we have a few folks scattered from the rest of the state. And of course, one person, that would be Colby, coming in from Colorado. So thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and dive in. What we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to be starting off with Keith Abeles from the Sonoma RCD, who's going to be talking about water smart farming practices. Keith was a farmer right here in Santa Rosa, outside of Santa Rosa at Quetzal Farm, and has since joined the Sonoma RCD, working with particularly soil and water conservation practices throughout Sonoma County. And I've been a farm advocate for a very long time, and we're pleased to have you here. And without further ado, why don't we pass it over to you, Keith, and we'll get started.
Great. Thanks, Evan. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up. All right. Here, I'm going to share my screen here. And all right. Ooh, here we go. Let's shoot. What's going on here? Huh. That is strange. Let me try that again. That did not work this time, but well, there you go. Let me try another route here. But anyway, I'm going to just say a quick word. My name is Keith Abeles, and I'm the soil and water specialist for the Sonoma RCD. I really appreciate you inviting me to come and join you here at CAFF. For those who don't know, I was actually the North Coast CAFF regional representative between 1998 and 2003. So I got to do a whole lot of stuff for CAFF. I probably organized a good 67 events. So it's really nice to see what what you're up to, Evan, and you got a whole different approach, and things have changed since then, but at the same time, it's a lot of the same stuff. So with that, let me try and get this going. It was working a second ago, and for some reason, it's not working now. So let me try another approach here. All right, let's see here. And we'll go back to Zoom. Sorry about this, folks. Can people see my screen now?
No.
Okay, that's strange. All right, sorry about the technical difficulty. We will get this right. I got another way to maybe do this. Let's go there. And go back to Zoom. And how about now? Can folks see my screen?
Yep. That's it.
Great. All right. So let's get to start the share, and off we go. Yeah, still not quite. Well, I might have to do it in this mode, but it's not letting me go to. There we go. Now it's letting me in there. All right. So here we go. Everyone see it? Evan, we good?
Great. Looks great.
All right, here we go. Water smart farming. So keys to water conservation. And let me just say a quick word before we really get going here. Is obviously this year it's really important. We had a dry year last year. We saw what happened with the fires. It wasn't good. We only got 13 inches of rain in Santa Rosa, to the best of my knowledge. This year we should be closer to 30 now. So we know that we're going to have to really conserve our water resources the best possible and get the biggest bang for the buck from whatever water we do have and make it work. A quick word on the RCD. I'm from the Sonoma RCD, and there's 2 RCDs in our county, Gold Ridge and ours. We cover sort of the east-north part. The Gold Ridge is sort of the classic West County, Sebastopol down to Valley Ford, up to Forestville on the south side of the river and over to the coast. So we help people with soil and water conservation and to best manage your resources and bridge environmental and ag concerns, just like CAFF does. And I encourage you to look at our websites to find out what we do, see what programs we have to offer. You can be in touch with us. Maybe we can help you with a technical assistance site visit on this or other subjects and see how we can help you. So with that, water conservation. These are the keys. Deliver what is needed, no more, no less. I'm going to get more into each of these in subsequent slides. Water budgeting, you gotta, just like a bank account, you gotta figure out how much water you have and how much you need and use it, the best you can. Moving from overhead to micro sprinklers and drip systems is critical. You want to maintain and monitor irrigation systems really closely, especially this year. Match irrigation to your soil type and its water holding capacity. You want to build up soil organic matter because that holds more water. And you want to use scheduling tools versus intuition or historical habits, really important. And it's going to take more than one thing to really do, to make your water stretch as far as it needs to. There's no one approach. It's really combining as many things as possible for the greatest impact. So water budgeting, how much water do you have and how much do you need? Some people know this. You might know what your allocation is or how big your pond is. Some people don't know because we pump groundwater. A lot of people do, and you don't necessarily know when you're going to hit the end, and you don't want to hit the end and find out there is a limit, but you want to maybe base it on what you've been doing. And you want to determine what does your crop really need and what kind of soil it is in and what is its water holding capacity. And then these last two are really important. You want to rule out high water need crops and ones that don't bring you a lot of money, especially in a year like this. This isn't the year to be growing corn. If you like having a little patch, let's wait till a wetter year, I would encourage. And, you really want to choose ones that are the most efficient, but you really want to choose the ones that have the best value so that if you can't grow as much, you can make the money you need so you can keep things going and farm again next year. That's the idea. To the right, you see there's a picture of Quetzal Farm where Evan mentioned that I used to farm, and I was a co-owner and manager there for several years. And you can see there's a big tomato and eggplant patch right there with oval hose and drip tape coming off it. And what we used to do at the farm, which everyone has a different system, but I advise you to do something like this. We used to have our workers at the end of the day, they would write down how many hours they worked and how many hours on each crop. And it was pretty rough. It wasn't accurate, I would say. Some of our workers were better than others, but at the end of the year, we would tally up those hours, and we were looking more at, what was worth growing money-wise. And if things had less than a 40-to-1 ratio of return on, or really gross to hours spent on it, we just stopped growing it. And at first, those were hard decisions to make. And after a while, they became really easy to make. And I think you might want to devise your own system that works along those lines so that you can choose the best crops and get the most out of your money. Out of what you do set up. So my next slide here is manage to use less water. You want to set up irrigation zones by similar water need. You don't want to have a bed that has a high water need at the end and a low water need at the front. And conversely, so you have 6 beds on one system, then you really want to you really want to have them be in a similar water use range so that you're not watering to the one that needs the most and overwatering everything else. Practice regulated deficit irrigation. That idea is that there's different stages of each plant, and at certain stages they absolutely need all the water. They need their minimum amount of water, and you'll really hurt them in production if you don't. And at other stages they might not need as much water, so you don't necessarily want to give them the same all season. You want to give them what they need when they need it. And this is really important. Grape growers do this in a big way, but it's possible to do this with other crops. Tomatoes, we used to dry farm, and other people do it with real reduced water. When they go to flower, you might not need as much water once the fruit is set, but you got to figure out your crops. Potatoes, people do this with. Wendy was saying that peas, people do it with. So learn your crop and learn if that's an option. And I will say with water, a lot of people will cut their water and maybe give it half the water it needs or 3/4. But I advise against this. If you're going to grow a crop, commit to it and give it what it needs. Just like if you have a dog or a baby, you give it what it needs. And if you can't give it what it needs, then maybe hold off on doing it. But to me, if you give it half the water and then it performs poorly, and you're still using that water, you're kind of wasting that water unless you're getting a good quality crop and the amount you need. Dry farming, when it's an option, it's great. But some people think they can dry farm and maybe they're not in a situation where they can do that. Make sure that you have a high water table and the right kind of soil, and then you can. A lot of times what works is just reduced water farming, and being more critical when the water is given. But some people lose their crops when they try to dry farm. So be careful. It is not for all situations, but if it is one for you, you want to take advantage of that. And then adjust water amounts with the season. Some people set their timers and around now or in early summer, and they never change. And then fall comes and maybe they don't need as much, or maybe they need more because their crop is at that stage. So be aware of that and don't do a one size fits all for the season. And adjust by plant size and stage. So save water here. Save water here is a bunch of different practices that I mentioned. Overhead, micro sprinklers and drip. Really monitor your systems, avoid leaks and blowout, measure and quantify your water use. Be a water geek. Start figuring out how much you're watering and keep track of things and start writing it down and take notes so you kind of know what to do, the next time you water, and don't deliver more water than you need. And we'll get into all this stuff a little more. Tools, timers, and controllers, really important. Use the best equipment you can, don't use that old leaky stuff anymore. And there are tools for improved scheduling, and we'll get into that, and using flow meters. So micro sprinklers and drip irrigation, this is key. Moving to micro sprinklers and drip tape and emitters. You'll see in the upper right, there's an overhead. That's sort of your typical rainbird. Those, different range of water output, but a lot of them put 3 or more gallons out a minute for each. And that's not real efficient a lot of times, especially when it gets windy or when you're watering in the middle of the day, or you get one that's clogged or just not performing well, and then you water the whole set more because you're watering to your weakest area, or you're getting uneven distribution uniformity. So you want to move to other types of watering. In the bottom right, that's a micro sprinkler. That uses sort of in between drip and the overhead, but it's a great option for, like, we used to use it at our farm to establish direct seeded crops. We did more transplants, but a lot of times we would use the micro sprinklers to get the seed going, and then we'd put our drip tape out and see where the lines were, and then we'd thin to the right spacing, and then take out the micro sprinklers. We'd just go with drip tape from there on, and it was a great option. And it was that might work if you're doing greens or other things that might need that. And then drip tape, though, start with the drip tube on the bottom left. That's 1/2 inch. That's the standard. You generally don't need 3/4 unless you got a real long run to get to an outer field and you need that kind of pressure and flow. But 1/2 inch is usually what works. And the pressure compensating emitters are in the upper right. Those can be really good. Pressure compensating equipment is the best. I'll talk about that more in a minute. But in the bottom left, you can see it has one drip. That's an inline emitter. A lot of them come with, you can buy that type of tube, and it has different spacings, maybe 1/2 foot, 8 inches, 18 inches, different spacings. The drip tape has that too. And you can really just line it up with your crops or plant right to the drip area. And then you really become more efficient as long as you're not getting blowouts and leaks. And here in the middle, there's that's what we really liked using, the oval hose on the bottom. Can operate at lower pressure pretty well. 8 to 15 is kind of what you want. And then you see the drip tape up above it. And that was just a really great way to go. And that hooks into the oval hose real easily. And you just got to stretch it each time. That's it. You got to keep on it. You can't just turn it on and walk away. You got to get the lines ready so they're watering where they need to. Maximize your equipment and efficiency. You want really even distribution uniformity. So that means every plant's getting basically the same amount. When you get the plugs and leaks or a bad overhead sprinkler, you start getting bad distribution uniformity. And if you use your system for fertigation, that's another place where you want it really even, every plant getting the same. You want to use pressure compensating equipment whenever possible, because then everything gets the same amount if you're between 10 and 50 PSI. Otherwise, when you're using other types of emitters, the higher the pressure, the more the flow, and the lower the pressure, the less the flow. And then things might be different pressures in different areas or different from set to set and time to time. And you don't want that. You want to deliver the same thing every time and know what you're delivering. Pressure regulators, really important. You got to be in the optimal range. Here's one here by my cursor. That's kind of a standard one. There are more advanced ones too, and simpler ones. And measure pressures and flows. Here's a pitot tube with a pressure gauge on it. You can plug it in anywhere in your system and take a reading. And I do these with vineyard evaluations, and really important tool. Sometimes you can measure at the end of your lines too, and there's equipment for that, but sometimes you get different kinds of readings at the end of the lines. This way you can look anywhere in your system, plug it up with a goof plug, super easy, super quick, super effective. But you want to know what's going on in your system. And install and maintain filters. If your filter starts clogging, you're going to start getting bad distribution uniformity or inadequate pressure. You really want to stay on that. We used to have to clean our disc filter once a day, and then maybe twice during the height of the season. So really maintain those. It makes a huge difference, and it avoids gunk getting in your system and plugging up emitters and other components. Let's see, there, oops. So steadfastly maintain and monitor your system, measure your flows. Those are just Tupperware containers under the emitters. Really effective way. You see, like, distribution uniformity from emitter to emitter, or look at different parts of your field. You can measure, you're going to want to measure your pressures and flows. You want to walk your lines and look at your system when it's on. Don't just assume everything's working. I find a lot of problems when I start looking, and you want to fix those right away. I really like using pressure gauges. I sometimes put one at the beginning of my system if I don't have a permanent one in there, a pressure gauge, just to, then if I see the pressure goes down during the irrigation set, you got a leak somewhere, and you go fix it. And I find those, and I do go fix them. And then upgrade your equipment whenever possible. Get better stuff, and stuff that doesn't leak. and use flow meters. Let's see, the next, avoid leaks. Leaks are bad. This was one where I was doing an irrigation evaluation in a vineyard. We'd actually been checking pressures on this line earlier when there was no problem. It was quite high. And then an hour later, we went by and this leak was happening, and it was a lot of water. And you know, I calculated once in my house, I measured at around 20, 25 PSI. I was losing 5 gallons a minute. I was filling up a 5-gallon bucket. So that's 300 gallons an hour. You run a 5-hour set, that's 1,500 gallons that you're just kind of flushing somewhere where it's probably not needed, or certainly doesn't want that much. And and if you got higher pressures going, you know, like this one's probably close to 50 where it's coming out, maybe even higher at that point because it's not in the drip tube, you're losing a lot of water, maybe 3,000 an hour or something. So avoid leaks. Measure and quantify leak. Your use. This is a inline flow meter. These are pretty expensive, but they're really helpful if you got one or you're willing to put one in. You can see how much you're using for the season, or when you run a set, or you know what different irrigation blocks are using. And then you can use that as a baseline to compare things to later, or see if maybe you have a leak. Some of them have a little dial like right here that spin, and if your system's not on and it's spinning, that means it's leaking. So these are really helpful. I'm a real advocate of tracking your use. They say if you can measure it, you can manage it, and I believe that. So tools, we all need tools. What are the tools? Okay, I think this one's really important. You know, a lot of things, what I'm going to tell you are things that you need to put in place for over time. And when if the drought endures, or when the next one comes around, they're not, you know, not everything is things you can just do right away. This you can. And I really encourage you to use these timers or controllers, even the bottom middle one. You can get that for under 15 bucks. You know, it's a 2-hour timer. You turn it on, it shuts off. I mean, how many of you who farm know, like, okay, I'm going to turn this thing off at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and you know you're busy, or you're still in town, or it's hot, and you're talking to an employee, or you just don't even want to walk out to the field because it's too far. You know, you want to use these timers because they do the work for you, and then you know exactly how much you delivered, and you can always turn it back on, which is nice. So there's different options you can see here. On the left, there's a timer out in the field hooked to, you know, you can do different sets at different times. It's hooked to a solenoid, so you don't need to be there, and it'll turn it on. If your system's real tight, you could do nighttime watering or off hours watering. If you go to the right, there's one hardwired into the field. We had one like this at our farm. It was a really nice option. And then there's no mistakes. And like I say, you can set it up, say Saturday at 5 o'clock, turn on, you know, section A for 4 hours, and it does it, and it turns it off. And it's a great way to go. The real advanced ones too even have leak detection, and they'll turn it off if the pressure changes. The far right one is a great option. It's, you know, for a hose fitting, but that sort of has the options of this 2-hour one and being simple and cheap, but also you can set different times and programs so that you don't need to be there every minute. And then the most advanced is this one, you know, with telemetry, and you can set it up with your computer or your phone, and you can turn the system on and off, or you can track what's been happening, and it's a really great way to go. But you know, it's more expensive, more involved, but once you got it, it's a great way to go. So timers and controllers, if you do nothing else. So use monitoring to assist with scheduling. You can monitor your soil conditions, evapotranspiration, weather, and like this last bullet, it's really important. You know, it tells the actual conditions and stress levels, and it's the best indication when it's time to irrigate. I mean, I know I've been guilty of this too. It's hot, I better water. That's not always the case. You know, a short heat wave might really not make much of a difference. And if you're putting out a lot of water and you're limited this year, that's not necessarily what you want to be doing, not the best use of your water. So monitoring tells you what's really happening. And, you know, a lot of people in the grape industry, they use this with plant stress measurements, which I haven't heard people using in vegetables as much. And they have a lot of success with that. And use, you know, some people, you know, can use a quarter of the water they're using before just by monitoring carefully and seeing what the actual conditions are. So a little bit more on that. Soil moisture monitoring, you know, here to the left, that's a potentiometer. You can walk around wherever you want, stick it in, and it's got, you know, a reading there that tells you what the water level's at. Here's one we used at the farm. This is kind of the stock one, most common. It's, you can get these for like 35 bucks. It's a gypsum block by Irritrol or Rainbird, and you can hook them up with PVC. And I'd walk around at the farm and take readings and, sort of relative water scale. And it was really helpful, easy way to do it. And it really made a difference. And I'll tell you, I know the goal is to save water, but with some crops we did, it told us we didn't need to water, but some we discovered we were underwatering. And we gave them more water and they did better. And like I said earlier, it's more efficient to give your crop what it needs and have the healthiest crop than to partially water it and have it underperform. And then you're still using that water. That's a different kind of waste. And so there's different options here as you go to the right. There's a bunch of other soil moisture monitoring companies, and there's a lot to choose from, and you can look online or get in touch with me and I can tell you some things to look at. This is kind of the Cadillac that we've used out in vineyards, where every 8 inches there's a sensor. In this one, it's AquaCheck, and then I'd go out and read the data every couple of weeks, and every half an hour it's taking a reading. And then you can hook them up with telemetry too, and it's really effective. So, and this is sort of what those ones do. So, you can see each time it rises, that's an irrigation event, and each color is a different 8-inch interval, and then this is. It's drying down, each day has this kind of 2 hiccups for night and day. And then, it's getting to this lower moisture level down here, and then off you go. Hey, and there goes there's my prompt to go to the next slide. So evapotranspiration, learn about the CIMIS system. It's free, it's online. You might have one near you. There's 4 or 5 in the county, and they tell you how much evapotranspiration is happening each day. It's not for your crop, but relatively you can see what's going on. And it's a really great way to see it. But you got to think your crops, they're conduits of bringing water from the ground into themselves, and the excess goes into the air, and that's lost water. So you want to replace what you're losing there. And CIMIS is a free system provided by the state. If you can track your own with weather stations, and a lot of them do, that's even better. Maybe you have a neighbor nearby that has one, and they'll let you get the information, and you can see when it's time to, some days it's not always quite what you think in terms of how much evapotranspiration is happening. Certainly on foggy days, there's a lot less when it's cool and foggy, but sometimes there's more or less than you think. So if you can track it, you can know, and there's ways to do that. Okay, here's an important opportunity that maybe a lot of people haven't tried: software for scheduling. And here's a nice dashboard. You can see it tells you, sort of what you need to do and how much. A lot of these, they take variables of your type of soil and your location and what the ET is, and maybe some other variables, and they tell you like when it's time to replace water, and keeps track of what you've done or not. So there's a free one here, Crop Manage. That's a UCNR one, I believe. And they're actually having a workshop on May 4th at 9 to 12, which is unfortunately the same time as the one here locally that Evan mentioned. But so I would encourage people to attend the local one that UCNR is putting in. But if you really want to learn this crop management system, check in with that. There's a gentleman named Michael CAHN out of Monterey, farm advisor, and look that up online, and you might have another way to learn about this system. But then there's these other ones, and what I learned recently from someone at Atra NCAT is that they used the 2-core at a small diverse farm in San Diego, and they had a lot of success with it. And I also heard the Netafim NetBeat is set up for smaller diverse growers. If you have bigger acreage, then there's these Airwatch and Vinduino or other options. But this is a whole new world here, and it's a good option. So I'm not going to say this is going to replace your irrigation water, but if you can collect and retain water, that's a great opportunity. The RCD, we do help people with designs, and in some cases implementation of these. Say you need some fresh water, for rinsing or for other needs around the barn. It's a way to create some storage and stretch your water. It's not going to work for creating your irrigation needs because crops just need too much water, but it's a great way to supplement your water and have it maybe when you're tight on it for where you need it. So maintain water on site with swales and ditches, and you want to infiltrate more on site. I mean, on years like this, some of those places where you're trying to get the water off on wet years, you might want to try to redivert, that ditch or that little canal. If it's not a blue line stream, you might want to try to keep that on site. So here's a little more on that. You want to increase organic matter content in the soil with compost, mulch, and cover crops. Oh, go back, please. Really important, and I'll talk about the organic matter in a little bit, but like compost, great way to increase your organic matter. Mulch does that, but also just retains a lot of the water. And for those of you who've used it, it really conditions your soil too. And I think it helps with the soil health. Improve your tillage techniques. You might be tilling too much. A lot of people till to avoid competition, and I get that, but some people till too much, and you want to avoid doing that. You don't want to do recreational tilling to make it look clean. But a lot of people do dust mulches for dry farming, and I really discourage that. I've learned more about that recently and seen some articles that really research that shows that one tillage really gets the same effect, but when you create that dust mulch, it's really destroying your soil structure, and that has other ramifications down the line that you don't want to do. You want to mow your cover early this year. I mean, a lot of people, I know you want that nitrogen, but like, as they get bigger, they suck a lot more water and they become a real competer. So with your crops. So if you got cover crop, this is a good year to mow it early and get the benefit of that cover crop, but before it starts taking too much water. If you can water early in the morning, late in the day and at night, that's great. You want to make sure though your system's real tight. You don't want to get leaks and come out the next day and find you threw 5,000 gallons out into your field in one little spot. But they say if you water at night, that's 10% more efficient if you're not getting the leaks and whatnot. Swales and berms, keep more water infiltrating on site. And then basic soil health, but also less evapotranspiration. You keep your soil covered and you minimize compaction. Be careful out there when it's wet. With your soil, when it's March and it's wet, you don't want to compact your soil with your tractor because that creates runoff. So here's a interesting thing. They're saying how much water can be held by organic matter, and they generally say for each % increase in organic matter, you can hold an additional acre-inch of water in that acre. I've heard between 20,000 gallons and 1 acre-inch, which is 27,154 gallons. So organic matter provides a whole lot of benefits. It's really important to sort of nutrient exchange, but it also, water retention is critical and you want that benefit. So let's see, we're moving right along. Avoid unnecessary water loss. These are a lot of little things that I think are important, but help to add up to your overall savings. A lot of people with your rinse station, you might have a hose at high pressure, and a lot of people just kind of like they're using them and then they put them down because they're talking to someone, or they got to load the box into the wash station or whatever it is. But get a manual shutoff valve or get one where you have to hold it when you need it. Don't just let it keep running. That's not in your interest, but it's really easy to just get a simple, cheap part that you just turn it off when it's not needed and you turn it back on when it is. A lot of leaks can just be fixed with one of these gaskets to the right here, this little O. A lot of times I think, oh, that leak's gonna be a pain, and I put in a gasket, takes care of it right away. So don't be afraid to get a bunch of those and fix your leaks and fix them quickly. Tighten your screws and fittings this year on a more regular schedule. And if you don't need to wash your equipment, don't. But if you do, maybe you can do it off site, so you're not taking the water away from the farm. I mean, here's a guy at the car wash. And that's not a bad idea. If you got a farm truck or you go to the farmer's market and you want to make your van look nice, don't do it at the farm this year. Do it at a car wash. They're more efficient anyway. Use options that don't require water. I mean, maybe you use water to clean your onions or wash something down, and maybe rubbing it with a towel this year or with your hands is a better option. And create systems to recycle and reuse your water. Say you have wash water, instead of just dumping it into a ditch where it maybe runs off or into a drain, maybe you can use it on your nearby plants and, just use a little piping to do that, or, create a system to create 1 or 2, washes sequentially, and you can use the dirtier water again. Makes a difference. If you have access to it, use recycled water. it's a, you know, it's a good resource. It's been proven over time to be safe. At my farm, we had access to it. We did have concerns about the perception of using recycled water, so we'd pre-irrigate with it. We'd grow our flowers with it and foliage. We'd do our landscape plants with it, and then once things were really growing, then we'd move to the groundwater, and that was a really nice way to go. So if you have the option or you can tap into it, you know, you want to do that. You got to stretch your water as far as it goes. And I think in a lot of cases, the recycled water, because it is regulated and controlled, is a better source or a cleaner source than some of the groundwater people might be using. So I haven't said that much about livestock water conservation. And honestly, I don't really focus on that in my job. But, you know, a lot of the same principles that I just talked about apply, and I do encourage people to hop onto that May 4th UCANR local event, because they'll be talking more about livestock. But if you do have livestock, you know, instead of using water to scrape down the cement pads or the compost pads, you know, there are dry scraping options, and there's different ones, and it can make a huge difference. That can be a huge water user. If you have irrigated pasture, K-lines are way more efficient and easier to work with. So it's a great investment. Lower your float valves out in the pastures so they're not filling up and then evaporating as much. Fix leaks. And in some cases, you might be able to catch some water that you use for your livestock and then, you know, gravity feed it down to where it's needed. And that could be an option. So increase your knowledge. I mean, there's a lot to learn. I still need to learn a lot. I think everyone needs to. You may, or, you know, I'm sure the people on this are on a continuum of what they know, but there are sources out there. Locally, go visit Harmony or Wyatt. Look at look at the websites, and DripWorks, great website, great catalog. You can learn a lot just by looking at what they offer. And like I say, with I didn't say much about the micro sprinklers or really the drip. It's like there's all these different options out there to use. I told you the ones I think are that I liked working with, but you know, it's sort of tinker toys, and it's not that hard. There is some nuance to it and getting better working with the parts and, you know, maintaining them, but it's really pretty easy, and it's kind of fun to put it together and put your systems together. But I encourage you to write down some of these names and look more online. There is resources for all these ones and some good ones. And I'd forgotten about the CAUSE, which is a CAFF related project. And I looked, it was on their website with a link to this, and they have some great material there. I really, you know, they did some work 10 years ago or less during the first drought, but they've kept it up. And I encourage you to look there and other places and get help. You know, we're going to hear from Andrew Loganville shortly about potential equip contracts. They can help people with water management equipment. The RCD, keep an eye out on what we might be able to offer help. UCCE or UCANR, see what they're doing. And then other farmers, talk to other farmers. You know, they're always the best source of information. Everyone's going through the same thing. Some people have experienced it more and have more tricks or have had more challenging. I mean, generally people who have had the most challenging situations figure out the best stuff. So talk to other farmers. And like I say, there's no one thing you can do that I wish there was. You just got to do lots of different things and have it add up. And using many techniques can add up to what you need to get through this season, especially if you made good choices about what to continue to grow and what to maybe hold off on until wetter times and more water. But I will say the last two bullets, it takes time and attention. I know as farmers, we have like kind of 15 primary things to do, water being one of those 15, but this year you got to give it more focus and you got to tighten up some of those things that maybe you let go in the past. And you can make strides and it'll make a difference. You don't want to run out of water, especially when you get to harvest time, when you're making your money. So with that, I believe that is my last slide. So there's my contact information. You can get in touch. I'm happy to talk to folks more. It is a busy time, but I know you're all busy too. So just get in touch and I will get back in touch with you. And I have a feeling I used up all my time. So we'll hold off for questions unless Evan wants to do that now. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. So stick around and we'll have a little Q&A session at the end of the webinar here. Yeah, some really great resources there. Thanks so much for sharing all those. One quick question. Will the slides be shared? Can we get those to share with today's attendees?
Yeah, I think that should be okay. Let me think about that. I hadn't thought about that, but I don't think there's anything too proprietary in there. And I want to share that, I shared it with you on this screen, so I can't see why not. So I will get back to you on that. But yes, if people find that helpful, then I would like to be able to help that way.
Great.
I'm going to stop my share now, everyone.
And yeah, the suggestions he gave towards the end, there's some really great online resources as well, where you can find a lot more information and dig in further. Sarah Tiffany shared the link to the Ag Water Stewards website, the CAUSE website there, and we'll share it again here. So do check those out. So next I want to transition to one of the things Keith said towards the end there is one of the best places to find resources is from other farmers. And that's one of the main goals of our organization. And we put on these monthly Farmers Guild, used to be potlucks. For the time being, we're not able to get together for a potluck and share resources and talk shop. And so we're transitioning here to this online format. But one of the great things about getting together in person around a table and a meal and sharing a beer is that just the ability to hear from other farmers, whether it's to get tips and resources, to get some inspiration or just commiserate, always valuable. So we wanted to make sure we brought in a little bit of that Farmers Guild flavor and get a farmer's perspective, find out what they're seeing on the ground, how they've adapted so far, and what they're looking forward to or concerned about as the season transitions. So Elliot, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Hey there. So Elliot is the irrigation manager over at New Family Farm. Elliot, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground there?
Sure, yeah. It's really dry, as we all know. I've been working for them and this property for the last few years. Last year was dry. This year is especially dry. So we get a lot of our water from Santa Rosa recycled water. And last year was the first time that I've been here where they gave us an allotment. And we got 2.5 million gallons last year, and at about 10 acres of mixed drip and overhead. I went through that in like 10 weeks. So it didn't last very long. This year, it's so much drier that the allotment is only 1.25 million. So it's half what it was last year. Last year, that only lasted for about 10 months. So we decided to put 5 of the 10 acres into fallow. It's just cover cropped right now. So we're only farming 5 of the 10, and it's all on drip for reasons that underlie what the talk that was just given. Drip is much more efficient water-wise. From what I've seen, using overhead versus drip uses a fifth to a tenth of the water, just because there's so much less wastage of just kind of spraying all over the place in evaporation. So we've gone all drip, and basically trying to, I'm like full-time irrigation, so everything that was just given in that presentation is stuff that I work on all day, and trying to keep systems efficient, give plants only what they need, no more, no less, and keep an eye on leaks, because leaks can waste a lot of water really quickly. But I'd say that whole presentation he just gave, go through those slides and take what he said seriously. All the tools, the equipment that he recommends just lets you set up a really water efficient system. So that's a good way to go. The only thing I would add is a tool that I use, at least on the scale that I'm at, of a handful to a dozen acres, where I can give my attention to that. Just digging is probably the most important tool that I use. Wherever I'm curious about how dry it is and how much water I've put down, just dig, go up near plants, plants and dig down a couple inches and see the kind of cone. It's easy to get lazy and think, oh yeah, because of habit, as you said, don't go with habit, don't go with what you've done previously. It's easy to go with habit and just turn things on how you used to, but more important to go out there and dig down and see if it's actually dry. And after watering, go out and dig again and see the effect of that half-hour watering, 1 hour watering, to see how it penetrated, how it spread. Go out again the next day and dig another hole and see how the water has moved. Some of the soils here, we have different fields. Some of them are really rocky and will drain quickly. Some are really mucky and clayey and they'll hold on to water forever. So it's you mentioned a lot of high-tech tools that can let you really refine your system and automate it well, but you do have to learn the particulars of the soil that your plants are in. I'm sure everyone knows. So just walking from one field to the next, the water needs are so different because of drainage. Just drainage. So I think that would be the one thing I would add is he did a great job. Like follow all of his advice with convert everything to drip and use the right tools, use the right equipment, stick with it. It's nuanced. There's a lot to learn, but it's worth it water-wise. And pay attention. Like you said, you have to measure it. Like put Tupperwares underneath the drippers and actually find out how much water you're putting down. Dig around, monitor, see what you're actually doing. Don't just assume what's happening. So that's what I'm trying to do. It's going to be a tight year. Half the water we got last year, half the crops, but it's all on drip. So just going to try to get that to last as long as possible by doing everything he said.
Did you change your crop selection this year as a result of sort of assumptions on availability?
That I don't make those decisions, but normally in the last few years, we've been growing a lot of cabbage for a company in Santa Rosa that does sauerkraut, and we're not doing that this year. So I don't know if that was water related because cabbage does take a fair amount of water. So we're not doing any cabbage. We're doing lots of lettuce, beets, root crops, squash. Squash takes very little water. So yeah, I'm sure the decisions from above were water conscious, but that's not my game.
All right. Well, awesome. We'll stick around and we'll dive into a little Q&A after Andrew's presentation. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.
All right. So our next presenter, we're talking about, let's see. So our next presentation is from Andrew Loganville from the NRCS. Now, as some of you are probably following, the state of California has yet to actually declare a drought officially. We're still waiting for Newsom to decide when he wants to do that. I would imagine it's a when as opposed to an if. But once that's declared, it has a much bigger much bigger impact on programs and changes in policy related to water conservation, both in urban settings as well as in agricultural settings. However, at the national level, we actually have had Agricultural Secretary Vilsack has declared a drought for several counties throughout California and the rest of the West. But that mostly applies to federal loans that are available to farmers during this. And so, Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the programs, the water conservation programs and assistance programs through the NRCS, and any other word that you've heard around FSA and federal assistance programs at this time?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Drew Loganville. I'm the district conservationist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and we cover out of our Petaluma office, Marin and Sonoma County. I have a little slideshow here. I'll kind of plow through a lot of it because there's a lot of fluff on here, but let's see if I can share. I remember how to do that. Hold on one second. Here we go. All right. Should everyone see that and hear me all right?
Looks great.
Great, wonderful. So, just a little background if you don't know who we are. Natural Resource Conservation Service, formerly the Soil Conservation Service, and that's been really our background, is addressing natural resources and resource concerns on agricultural and private forest land. We share an office with the Farm Service Agency, and so I am going to try to give a little update on some of their programs, as they tend to have a few more programs available. Although it seems like a lot of the assistance they have is very much livestock based. This is a little background on who the Farm Service Agency is. And so, they're a customer driven agency with diverse and multi-talented workforce. As it says here, really they have a lot of different programs available agricultural wide. Again, what we do, we are a voluntary agency, and our basis is really offering that free science-based advice to farmers and ranchers and forest landowners. And we have a bunch of different professional scientific advisors within the agency. And within our office, we have soil conservationists, rangeland specialists, foresters, engineers, and biologists. And we're non-regulatory, and I'd say that most people come to us for our financial assistance, which seems to be very beneficial, but we also have this technical assistance side to go out and offer that free expertise or technical planning, and that's kind of a background of how we work. So kind of digging in, and I think this is a lot of what people are interested in, or what programs are available. So as far as the NRCS programs, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program is our core program that we use to address resource concerns and implement conservation practices on the land. We do have some other programs as mentioned here. There's the easement programs and conservation stewardship programs to further enhance what you may have already done through EQIP. And then the Farm Service Agency, I've listed a bunch of their programs here, but I'm going to go into them in a little bit more detail. So the KNAP program is one of their main ones, but this is a program that you have to pay into prior in the year. So the next sign up is for next year. It will be starting in June. So while this can help pay for grass on the ground and grass losses and sometimes water hauling, it only applies to those who have paid into it previously. And so you'd be looking into next year. So there's some details here on the program. Again, I'm not going to run into it too much, because unless you've already paid into it, you probably know about it. And if you haven't, then there's some time to do some research. But again, that'd be for next year. There's the forage, our livestock forage disaster program. And this one applies as being at the D2, so it'd be the USDA drought monitor for at least 8 weeks. Again, this is very much for feed payments. And so again, I know this isn't as directly related to what we're looking at on cropland, but for those diverse operations, this might be something that could be of importance. And then we have the ELAP. So once the drought monitor reaches the D3, this one's automatically triggered, and this will help pay for water hauling and provide some feed coverage for up to 3 months. So again, this is another a program that seems to be utilized quite a bit through the Farm Service Agency. So kind of going back to what I know more about is EQIP. As of right now, this kind of shows we have different initiatives through EQIP. We have open and application periods, but we fund projects and applications a few times a year. And as we look for drought, we have our regional fund pools through cropland that we could fund a lot of different practices. But as of now, we do not have an emergency drought program. I have heard rumblings of it's something that's being discussed right now. So I'm hoping that we'll have something that will come out for that. but looking at past experience, we had a drought program in 2014, and it was heavily emphasized for livestock. But looking at, what can we do through EQIP for drought and for cropland, and a lot of what has been talked about already, especially the irrigation, we have a lot of different practices we can work with that. So I'm going to get into that in a second here, but the basic program eligibility is being an ag producer, having control of the land through a deed or a lease, and complying with our adjusted gross income provisions of a $900,000 average income over the last 3 tax years. And we do have higher payment rates for socially disadvantaged, beginning, and limited resource farmers. And I'll get into this next, but this is kind of our typical scenario. So, and again, I want to kind of focus on a lot of the irrigation. So we can assist with upgrading irrigation systems that be a more efficient system with measurable water savings, and the conservation is the biggest part of that, water conservation. So I think our typical scenarios are maybe moving from a overhead sprinkler system to micro irrigation. We do have scenarios where we help with irrigation water management, and this is a lot of the monitoring process that you're looking at for your land. So looking at doing soil moisture probes and record keeping using flow meters, so you can get that water budget. We do assist with irrigation evaluations. We'd be using a third party to do those, but we could help with the funding for that. So, and I find that, the soil moisture probes through the irrigation water management has been huge, and especially the irrigation evaluations, because you're finding what your issues are. I think even as Keith mentioned, every once in a while you'll find instances of maybe you could water more, but I think there's been a lot of savings, especially when, what time of the year to start watering. I think a year like this, we're obviously watering a lot earlier than we would, but other years it could be more into the delaying your irrigation. We do have practices, again, more for the livestock side. This is probably most popular. What we do assist with the drought is supplying water facilities for livestock in available areas where there's available feed. And so this is, in some cases, establishing new water sources if it's justifiable, or storage, and usually pipeline and troughs. But coming back to cropland systems, we have practices for mulching, and I think Keith mentioned the benefits of mulching and cover crop. And one of the newer practices where we've kind of been able to do it on cropland in the past, but we're now able to apply compost on different land uses, including rangeland and pasture. And it's called soil carbon amendment. Is a new intern practice that we have, and it allows for applying compost and as well as applying biochar on cropland. And we have a whole orchard recycling program as well through that practice. So that's a new practice that we're help funding with this year. I find it really beneficial. There's a lot of details on that. If you're interested, please contact us, but we're still trying to figure out some of our details of what our requirements are. And we keep getting more information on that as the time goes. And then there's a few other things we do here. Again, more livestock based of different fencing, invasive weed control. And other things kind of falls in the technical assistance, but we do some drought contingency planning as well. One of the issues with EQIP is it's not set up as an emergency program, and we continually, I think I continually get a little bit frustrated with this program because there's a lot of great conservation practices we can do. But as far as it being taxpayer dollars, we have to go through our environmental evaluations in order to be able to have the money available for implementation. And a lot of times that could cause some holdups, as well as waiting for the funding to come in. As I mentioned, we fund projects twice a year typically. And our next one's coming up in June 9th, I believe, is when we submit projects. But getting application prepared, getting farm records established and eligibility done takes some time beforehand, and we're very busy. So, and then then you have to see if you're you are funded because it's competitive throughout, and our competition typically stands within the Bay Area, so the surrounding counties of the Bay Area, and then but if you are awarded the contract, and then getting that ready, we have a process, a waiver process. So if there's a conservation practice you need to do, and you're going to do it regardless of you get funded or not, obviously funding would help. We have a process we could go through, so allowing you and giving you the specifications of doing those practices prior to the funding coming through. So those are some options to speed it up a little bit. I think for a lot of these more complex projects that would take engineering or maybe more in-depth environmental evaluation, we'd be looking at maybe further down the road and further drought resiliency for the future. Because I think at the stage we're at right now and how our funding comes out, it's going to be challenging to get the funding out there in the next couple months in order for people to really get conservation practices in the ground when it's needed before we get really dry here. So that there's a couple of resources here. I think Keith had a much better list of resources, and otherwise I know we're on the question side, but here's our contact information for me and as well as Cecilia at the Farm Service Agency. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thanks so much. And we'll make sure to, in a follow-up email to everyone who attended tonight, we'll make sure to include contact information, links to these resources that are being shared. We will definitely be getting folks the information. I want to go ahead and spend the next 20, 30 minutes here diving into some of these questions. We got some good questions so far in the chat, but if you have additional questions, feel free to drop that in the chat. And between our various panelists this evening, we'll get those answered for you to the best of our ability. Wanted to start off with one of the questions we had, sort of two-part question. One is, how do you determine your soil water holding capacity? And then secondly, how do you determine what a crop needs water-wise and at specific times? Is there a resource for those types of questions?
I can jump in there, although Drew, you might want to speak more to it. But the USDA has the NRCS has the Web Soil Survey. And in the 70s, they cataloged all the different soil types, everywhere in the United States, including Sonoma County. And if you type in NRCS Web Soil Survey, it will lead you there, and you can start a session. You got to learn how to use it, but you can pull up your soil type. It's rough. It's not always completely accurate, but it'll give you some good ideas, what type of soil you have, and you can go further into it and actually pull up the available water holding capacity, as well as several other kinds of indicators and whatnot that you might be interested in. So I highly encourage you to use that and learn how to use it. And then you can ground truth things to see if you think it's accurate. I actually spent some time looking for resources that talked about like different crop needs in central, California coastal areas. I went to 5 pretty good sources of people and I got nothing. I remember seeing something along this lines like 30 or more years ago, like at Cabrillo College, but I could not find anything on that. But it also is really a site specific. And I think Elliot did a really good job of that. That was something I don't think I really emphasized. Like at our old farm, we had one field that was like clay and we knew it, but we could always get in that one first. And then other areas we had to wait. So, I'd say like experience, his suggestion to put in a shovel, I think that's pretty obvious. I sort of inferred that, but yeah, that's a great way to go. Take your shovel out there and see how wet it is, and you'll start to learn what field acts in what way and how it sucks up the water or not. So, Drew, I don't know if you want to add to that, or someone else might want to add to those resources.
Yeah, I think you said what I was going to say about the Web Soil Survey. Absolutely. I was going to look into about the specifics about crops. I believe there's a good guide out there about finding out how much water crops get, but I'll have to do some research to find the exact website, and I'll forward that along.
We have another question here about mulching ideas. Wondering if you speak to mulching materials, mulching techniques, Any tips on mulching or resources you might want to point people towards?
Sure, you want to
I'll
go?
say we have some basic standards and specifications on mulching, and that's something else that I could follow up with and post that for that specific practice. It's going to be a pretty generalized mulching application, but there will be some ideas and as far as giving recommendations on how thick a mulch and how to apply. Again, it's, as I say, generalized. In some cases it's for erosion purposes and things like that. So other than that, I know there's some guidance on as far as if you're going to use compost as mulching, and there's certain, I think there's definitely discussion on different amounts and to apply for that. And again, sometimes it goes for the purpose for soil moisture or whatnot. So I'm not sure if Keith has more on suggestions for if, we're talking really about water conservation, what a good depth for mulch is and what materials. I think compost can be beneficial. There's definitely a lot of varieties of different mulch out there, including wood chips and other things.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Ad. I'm becoming more and more interested in mulch all the time. I think it works really well. It can really hold quite a bit of water. I'm seeing areas where I'll put mulch down. It can hold, and you can, if you put it thick enough, and it can hold water for another month. So, I mean, it depends what your crop is. I mean, obviously you're growing a bunch of greens on high density, mulch isn't a good option. But if you're planting, if you got trees or berries, you can mulch around there, and that can make a huge difference. Even like if you had peppers, and we did this to some degree, once you got the drip and whatnot, established, you can put mulch over it, and it can really save a lot of water in the end. Plus, I really feel like it conditions the soil in a way that's really nice. With mulch, it can add up, and you can need a lot, but if you put 6 inches down, it's going to hold the water, and it's going to keep the weeds out unless there's weed seed in the mulch. And we used to get mulch through our QIP contract that we had in our last few years of farming. So that was nice. But I will say that not all mulch is created equal. Some mulch is sort of just like the end product of grab and grow of all the other products they make, and they're pulling out the kind of woody material. Still could be a great product to use, but I know a grower at Old World Winery who's starting to make this really high quality mulch, and it's like he's bringing it up to heat and putting in water, and it's sort of a hybrid of compost and mulch, and it's really nice material. And I think he's trying to get to a point where he can do that commercially, and I think that's something that might be a real option in the future, especially with all the fires and whatnot. And there's a lot more chips being made, I think, out there in the world because of fire fuel load reduction. And so I'm hoping there'll be more opportunities for more mulch to make it into the ag sphere and start connect that fuel reduction with the ag carbon sequestration efforts. And mulch is great. I'm all for mulch.
Well, speaking of carbon sequestration and other ecological services, we have a question here about, and you had kind of made reference to this earlier, Keith, about wanting to leave those cover crops in and trying to balance. So the question is, could you talk about how to balance the water demand versus the soil health benefits of cover cropping in relation to water scarcity, and what impacts, when you're trying to balance those decisions on what to irrigate, what needs the water. Obviously, building up that soil organic matter through cover cropping increases soil health, which increases water retention. But of course, they also do require water in and of themselves. So can you speak about how to maybe balance that? Or
I will speak to that, although that could be like a whole topic unto itself. And like in farming and so many other things, there's trade-offs, and there's what is a benefit on one side might cause some other challenges on another. Cover crops are great. I'm a big proponent of them. I don't think this is the year to do summer cover crops because it's just more water that you need to apply. But if you did winter cover crop, you've done it. But like I say, it's a good time to mow it. I mean, cover crops, there's sort of two main categories. There's cereals and there's legumes. And a lot of people want to wait until the plant's, gotten to that stage where the benefits of the legumes and the nitrogen have really developed. But at that point, you're starting to lose more water through the plant because it's a big plant and it has a much higher water demand. So I would say at this point, you've got the benefit of the cereal, the grain, and it's starting to go to seed. And if you cut it now, one, you can just let it lay there and, there'll be some volatilization, but you'll also get some benefit there, and it acts like a mulch. But what's in the ground is there, for the legume or the cereal, and that will break down over time and you'll get that benefit. But if you're holding on to get that nitrogen, you might start losing more water than you want out of the ground, and it might be competing for your crop. And so that's where I'd say on a year like this, maybe this is the year to put compost if you're trying to get that organic matter up. I wouldn't try to make your cover crop do as much as it normally does. I think it really would be a benefit. That's just what I've learned over time, because I used to like to leave plants in the ground longer, but I think I'm learning that once plants get big, they suck a lot of water. And when they're small, it's just exponentially less. So for the trade-off this year, I would say you're still going to get a lot of soil health from that cover crop, but maybe give up some of that last stretch of the nitrogen so that you can keep more water in the ground. That'd be my take. I'd be curious to hear from others online too.
Anybody got additional questions you want to drop into the chat, or feel free to just unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. We've got just a little more time for maybe just a couple more questions.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul Wirtz here.
Hey there, Paul. Nice to see you.
Hey, good to see you too. Hey, I'm wondering what the current state of affairs is with the county or the state and controls over water use issues.
Well, there's certainly at the county level, there was the cutting back on recycled water, right? That was the big the big news the last couple of months is, there were a lot of farmers who relied on recycled water allocations, had built their entire businesses based on those allocations in some cases, and those have been dramatically cut back. And as you heard from New Family Farm, they had to cut back big time on their production as a result of that. As far as
my question really was more about, aren't we supposed to be developing a groundwater use?
Oh, the groundwater.
And where are we at with that?
Right. So you're referring to the Groundwater Sustainability Management Act.
Yeah. That's,
Right. So that's a really good question. So for those of you who aren't familiar, SGMA is a legislation at the statewide level to manage groundwater. And basically what they did was create, recognizing that we're at risk of overdrafting our water resources from our aquifers all over the state, in some places so bad that the ground was beginning to subside and bridges were crumbling in the Central Valley. They created this legislation that instead of the state coming in and basically telling counties and farmers what to do, they basically set up these local task forces around the state with a number of different stakeholders from each community in each water basin that had some level of threat to overdraft. And they basically said, if you can come up with your own local provisions, your own local policies, and that prevents the reduction of those aquifers, if you can slow that, if you can prove that you're slowing down those overdrafts, then you can do it on a local level. And I think the idea behind that is only in the case that a local community and those stakeholders, only unless they fail to come up with local policies and regulate themselves locally in an efficient way, then the state would have to come in and start putting orders on high, right? So one of the challenges with SGMA is, especially for most of the folks on this call, if in the CAFF community are small farmers, right? One of the challenges, of course, with that is that getting small farmers to show up to meetings to represent one another is always a tough task. Staying abreast, having the time and wherewithal to show up and be part of those meetings. So it's always, we've been advocating to get local small scale farmers on these water basin Sigma groups, or the GSA groups, right? So, there's one for the Santa Rosa Plain, there's one for Sonoma, one for Petaluma. So I'm not sure where exactly it is locally. Wendy, are you here on the call? Maybe you could speak up to what the current state of things are in Sonoma.
Sure, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are lucky because we do have a rep on the advisory committee for both the Sonoma Valley Basin and the Santa Rosa Plain Basin. And they've been following this closely and reporting to us. What's happening this year is all three basins are developing their plans. And once they develop their plans, then they're approved by the state, then they're going to get put into action next year. And then all of us on wells are going to need to pay a yearly fee to help fund the implementation and monitoring of those plans. What's happening this year is the criteria for the 7 indicators of groundwater quantity and quality are being determined. What are the criteria? How are they going to determine what should be, what's counted in the plan, and how it's monitored? So this is where we've been asking all of us to pay attention because the criteria are so important. So for example, for farming, they've come up with assumed rates of water use per crop. And that information is available on the websites for the groundwater sustainability agencies. And we have been suggesting that people look at those. And in this context of this conversation is great. And again, people like Elliot who have some ideas of exactly how much water it takes to produce a crop should look at what is being projected and see if it seems realistic, because that based on those assumptions is how our rates are going to be determined. So in a nutshell, that's my understanding of where we're at. And feel free to contact us if people want more information.
Which is another good plug. For those of you who aren't familiar, in addition to putting on webinars and our monthly Farmers Guild potlucks, we also have a leadership circle here at the CAFF Sonoma County chapter, as well as putting together groups similar to this in other parts of the state. And what we do at those meetings is dig into these more nitty-gritty topics, talk about representation, talk about when ordinances are proposed by the county, when things like the GSA come up, and we're talking about how to measure and monitor groundwater use on small farms. This is a group that's reads through those and makes sure that small farmers have a voice, writing letters to county supervisors, basically making sure we stand up for the small farm, right? And making sure our local food community is going to be resilient and be able to survive. So if anybody here is interested in being a part of that, lending your expertise in the realms of local agricultural policy, or just want to give a perspective as a real world farmer dealing with things on the ground, we'd love to have you as part of those meetings. We meet, Wendy, you want to give a plug for when we meet?
Sure, I'll do that. And then I wanted to circle back with a couple other things more on topic. But yeah, and we have our CAFF chapter web page, which maybe Evan can stick in.
I'll link it to in the chat.
Yeah, and that's where the recordings for these and other of our previous meetings, guild events, our VIP tours and other things, our pitchforks and policy events. Those are all posted on our chapter webpage. We meet on 4th Monday evenings from 6:30 to 8, the same kind of time frames. So we'll have one next week. Next Monday night is our next chapter meeting. And yeah, great group of people. And we'd love to have anybody who just wants to check it out. Everybody's welcome at those. Circling back to topic, I wanted to throw out one of the many amazing bits of wisdom that I learned from Stan Devoto regarding fruit trees and this idea of when do crops need their critical watering periods. If we don't have very much water, we just want to get the crops through the season as productively as possible. And it's definitely harder, but there is information out there if you search hard enough for various veg crops. For fruit trees, established, not young, but established fruit trees, what Stan taught me and others was June and late summer. That making sure that, he's during the last drought, he had to put irrigation on his dry farm trees and he watered them twice, a deep watering in June and a deep watering late summer. In June, not only is the crop for this year being, formed and set and going to start, growing, but the potential fruit buds for the following year. If a tree is really stressed in June, you might not get a decent crop the following year. So that's really critical. And then late summer is another time when the tree needs to both recover from this year and also have enough resources to store its carbohydrate load that it gained from the year to get through the next winter and leaf out the next spring. So I wish we had that kind of critical information for every single crop, but a lot of it is experience. And as the presenters were saying, paying really close attention.
Good.
Oh, and I did one other thing I wanted to say. We do want to continue doing these monthly webinars and want some input from you all about what other are really timely topics for us to cover. One that came up was opening up, emerging markets for this year. There's some new farmers markets. What did you learn during COVID about marketing that is really pertinent to this year? Just something on market opportunities for this year. And another, of course, sadly, timely topic is prep for fire season this year. What should we as producers be doing more than what we already have learned from our far too abundant experience with wildfires? And in the fall, we definitely want to have one on land access in conjunction with Ag and Open Space District. They have a new ag specialist who is just hired, and they'll have a new manager. And also there's a great staff person who's focusing on land access for food farming. And once that whole team is on board in the fall, we definitely want to do a webinar with them. Okay, that's it for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy. And whether we're meeting on Zoom or eventually getting back to our old Farmers Guild potlucks, make sure you're on our mailing list to get those updates and invitations. You can also follow us on social media. We have Farmers Guild Facebook groups where you can post questions, resources. It's a really great place to ask questions, get advice from other farmers, or share resources that you find, whether it's related to drought, new markets, or hey, what's this pest on my cabbage? It's just a really great place to connect with folks. Well, I don't want to keep folks too much longer, but we're going to send out a follow-up email to everyone who attended tonight with the resources that were shared tonight. And then, of course, before we end tonight, I do want to make one more plug for our partners putting on this right here. So if you didn't get enough tonight, and of course, there's so much more we could be exploring when it comes to the drought and how to, whether it's how to manage it or funding and relief that's available, including for livestock and pasture. Our friends over at UC Extension and UC ANR are going to be putting on this drought webinar. So do check that out. We'll share a link to that event as well. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. And just want to give a really big thanks to all of our speakers tonight, Elliot, Keith, Andrew. Really great resources from the Sonoma RCD and of course from the NRCS, which we'll share out in a follow-up email. But I'm gonna let you guys go enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you so much for joining us here at the Farmers Guild, put on by Sonoma County CAFF chapter in partnership with Sonoma RCD. Thank you guys and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Evan.